All right. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well. Pardon my, oops, sorry, I'm not even on the first page. Pardon my screen, my picture there. I realize it's teeny tiny, but that is just the way it is, and I don't really understand why it's doing that, but it is, so we're just going to go with it. All right. Here we go. We're going to be talking about child sexual abuse. We're going to be talking about children and adolescents in dealing with crisis, and we're also going to talk about preparedness. This is more of an institutional type situation in schools, universities, being prepared literally for some kind of an incident. This could even be, I mean, there's national preparedness plans, there's city and state preparedness plans. I mean, it's a big deal, but we'll get into some of that. Okay, so it's hard to emphasize in my mind the importance of this first bullet. It is extremely sad and it's extremely common that this crime is unreported. Part of that is the guilt and the shame that go along with it. Oftentimes, the victims are blamed and told it's their fault. They may be threatened and told that if they tell anybody, they'll hurt their parents, and so that small child believes them and doesn't turn in, just never says anything. There are untold numbers of people running around out there who have never ever said anything to anybody, which is just tragic because then they can't work through it and can't get the help that they need. Really, I think it even blocks the Lord's ability to heal them. Not that the Lord lacks an ability, but our part in the process is to be able to confess and to talk about and to process for our healing. The consequences are I think uh, a, a ginormous meteor hitting the Earth, and it just I don't know if you've ever seen a compilation of what that might be like, but literally it scorches the entire world. It destroys the whole world. So we're not talking shock waves of a. I don't notice I didn't use the analogy of the shock waves of um, a rock thrown in a pond. That is too mild in my mind. Physically, we'll get into some of the details of these consequences later, so I won't talk about them a lot right now. 83,000 to 180,500 people um, annually sexually abused, and this is underestimated probably. Now, if you're thoughtful, if you're thinking, if you're breathing, you look at that and go, "Wow, that's a wide. That's like 100,000 gap there." And exactly, and that goes back to bullet point number one: is how much of this is unreported, and it doesn't really. We just don't know. Most of the abuse, sexual abuse to a child, is by somebody that either a family member or somebody that the family knows and trusts, which is part of why it's so detrimental emotionally and psychologically and cognitively for a child, because this is supposed to be somebody that we trust, right? And as a small child, that's a very concrete thing, and little children can be very trusting. And here, this person is supposed to be a part of safety and even a part of who helps keep me safe. And they're doing this to me, which again just adds. It's really sad. I I think there's a line between paranoia and being vigilant and alert and wise. I have four girls, and when they were little, and we talk about babysitters, we were very picky. Then we would turn the world upside down over a situation where we didn't feel safe with our child. Whatever event it was, however big of a deal it was, if we had to just not go, then we would just not go, or we would divide and conquer. One of us would stay on with the kids, and the other one go. So to me, there's no honor, there's no event, there's no dinner, there's no anything worth putting my child at risk. So we were very, very picky. We did have babysitters. We had relationships with youth in our church that we would have come and watch our kids. Always a girl. Um, Call me sexist, but that was what my wife and I agreed on. I know that doesn't mean that there won't be a problem, but these were families we knew and kids that we knew and felt good about. Um, so yes, we got babysitters and we went out and we did things, of course, but we were very, 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 very careful about who we trusted our children with. Um, well, I'll come back to that. We'll circle around to that. Probably talk a little bit more about those concepts. So obviously the best thing that we can do is prevent child sexual abuse. I certainly children can be educated, and that's helpful. That's good, and they need to be, and they are being in most cases and in most schools, both public and private, and that is very good. After school programs tend to provide a safety net for kids who, instead of having to go home alone, which causes them to be vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable space for children. For a lot of, obviously, they can get in trouble and do things that they shouldn't be doing, but they're also greater potential of becoming a victim. And to me, the number one is families, and that's first on the bullet there. We as families need to be vigilant. We need to be intact. We need to be, when possible, no shame on anybody if you're not a part of an intact family. But uh, statistically speaking, the safest kids are kids with healthy families, good relationships. The breakdown of the family is one of the things that we believe as Christians that Satan is attacking. And this is one of the reasons is because it renders the children vulnerable to all kinds of things, not just to sexual abuse, but certainly that is one element of that. There is for a perpetrator, perpetrators are very many times they're very sophisticated, sophisticated in an evil way, sophisticated in terms of manipulation and in terms of savvy to what's going on. And if the kid is from a healthy, intact family, oftentimes they're like, yeah, no, that's not worth it. There is, we were literally at the Super Bowl party last Sunday. A dad showed up. His daughter was in the car crying. He showed up at our house. We're like, oh, what happened? And she had gotten into a whatever verbal spat with one of the kids, one of the boys, and he wanted to talk to that boy. So we were like, okay, we'll go get him. I was like, oh. Um, and he was really cool about it. He said, you know, you got to understand, I'm a father. This is my daughter. I don't care who's to blame. I'm not blaming you 100%. I'm going to have a talk with my daughter as well. But you need to understand, you need to leave my daughter alone. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. I mean, it wasn't even directed at me, and I'm standing there going, oh, yeah, this like 14-year-old kid's just standing there about to, with his eyes bugging out, and I thought to myself, this is beautiful. This is good. This is powerful because this is a picture of what God intended for us. We are to protect our children, and we do that. And I'm not saying moms can't do that either, because moms can do that, and it can be just as powerful. Mom's standing there scared, like, oh, I'm scared. Oh no. I hope somebody's laughing, chuckling at least a little bit. You can laugh at me even. I know I can't see you, so whatever, right? Um, but um, but there is power in that. Um, so 1 in 3 females and 1 in 6 males are what we're looking at. And again, it's hard to have accurate statistics because of the unreported nature of the crime. And there seems to be a trend when you look at studies that there is an increase in the amount of males that are being targeted and victimized. And I mean, what does that mean? I don't know. I have thoughts, but I'm not. That's like a whole nother subject, a whole nother time. Generally between ages 7 and 12, and you think about that, those are very vulnerable times. And at some level, conveniently, the child is more easily physically manipulated, handled, controlled, so to speak. You get some 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, she's potentially fairly strong and fast, and she may run away, she may fight you, she may kick you and hurt you, those kinds of things. So that's literally just it's some level. It's almost a crime of convenience, a crime of ease, if you will, because they're vulnerable. Obviously, there is a twistedness for pedophilia, which is pedophiles are people who are sexually attracted to children, so that's an element of what's going on there too as well, obviously. It doesn't seem to be, when you look at it across the board, that one particular race is more victimized than another. And children with disabilities, and again, why? Because they are more vulnerable. They are easier to take advantage of. They are at greater risk. So the definitions, you'll see this in the world of counseling. Definitions are not widely agreed upon for many things, and it is a soft science, if you will. And I love that. I mean, for some people that makes them crazy. And if you're an engineer, if you're very type person, it's just like give me a concrete definition. There is there are some legal things that we would talk about, and which helps with the definition, so to speak. So these change from state to state. When you look at the ages, you need to be familiar with the ages in your area. So, for example, if both are minors, both are underage in the state of Texas, if a boy and a girl have sexual activity together, and the boy is 2 years older than the girl, then that would be statutory rape. If it is a child that is having sex with an adult, so if a minor, 16 years old, having sex with a 20-year-old or 18-year-old, even 19-year-old, that is statutory rape. So child sexual abuse is a very broad term for sure. Very oftentimes it is a caregiver, a caretaker. I should say caregiver. Caretaker is the guy that carries you off when you die. Caretaker, sorry. Okay, so statutory rape, we've covered that in essence. And again, you want to be familiar with that in your state as to exactly what the laws are. Now, I will say that a lot of that, what that is in essence saying, is that this person, this 16-year-old, does not have the psychological and emotional maturity, therefore lacks the ability to consent to sex. So even when you're talking about a 16-year-old with a 19-year-old boyfriend, and when I hear that, right, my head explodes, and I'm like, where is mom and dad? I would be very happy to meet a guy at the front door and say, this is not happening. I don't ever want to see your face again, period. Do you understand? Oh, that's unchristian. That's cruel. That's whatever. Well, if you feel that or think that, you haven't really read Jesus. Because he was tough at times. I mean, he was real tough at times. So when it comes to defending our own and defending our family, yes, I will get pretty tough. So ability to consent. So 16-year-old and a 19-year-old, what we're saying is, in essence, that the 19-year-old has so much more social power over a 16-year-old. 16-year-old is like, oh, he's 19 and he wants me. How cool is that? And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that picture? And so that opens the door for him to be able to take advantage of her, or vice versa. But again, that's most commonly that direction, gender-wise. Okay, so here's how this works. Here's the cycle. This is what happens. Now, if you're really following this and thinking about this, there's going to be a part of you that is like, oh, this is disgusting. This is horrible. This is evil. And yes, it is very much. And sometimes as sex offenders and sex abuse, people who sexually abuse children, as they become more experienced, they become very systematic and very really good at what they do. A sex abuser can have hundreds of victims, literally, before they're caught. That is, I don't know how common it is, but they'll have 10, 15, 20, 30 very commonly, possibly over 100 at times. So the perpetrator of the sexual abuse identifies an easy target. What is an easy target? An easy target is a child with a low self-esteem. An easy target is a child that is timid. An easy target is a child that does not have a close relationship with his family and or a broken family. They will begin to groom the child. So, for example, you might have a relative or a family member or a friend of the family or a friend in the neighborhood who begins to give gifts to one of your children. Now that, man, that is a problem in so many ways and at so many levels. I'm going to step in and say, whoa, time out. Give a gift to all my children, or don't give a gift to any of my children at all. What is this about? What does this mean for you to give a gift to one of my children? Why would you do that? One of the reasons you would do that is you're grooming them. This process of winning them over. You're playing with them. They will um, get on the floor and wrestle with them. Oftentimes begin to touch them more and more, very gradually, kind of non-sexual, but more and more towards touching them in places that you wouldn't normally touch them. But we were just rolling around on the floor and it just happened, so no big deal. The kid doesn't even realize it's going on usually at this point. Sometimes a kid will feel a little funny something, but they probably usually will blow it off. They will begin to step up their game, and reinforcements in terms of gifts and privileges. Hey, I'll let you, sit in my lap and steer the car, as we drive down the road, or I'll buy you some candy, or what. Literally, I mean, just a little stuff like that. And eventually, it'll come to the point once they get to the point where they feel like they own the kid. That's kind of street language, but that's appropriate here. They may integrate punishments into. If you tell anybody, I'll be mad at you, or I'll hurt you, or I'll hurt your family. Oftentimes there is a generational curse in these people. This is something that's been going on in their families for a very long time. As we know, biblically, sins are passed down from generation to generation. So what are the signs and the symptoms? Now, we really don't want to go out into the world after hearing a lecture like this and look at a kid who's struggling and say, oh no, that kid must have been sexually abused. There can be a million reasons that a kid would display different types of symptoms, and we have to be wise, and we have to look at what some of these possibilities are. Okay, so we these symptoms can be broken down in externalized or internalized, and that's that means exactly what it says, right? So if you're watching a kid and they're like acting out and running all over the place, or hitting people, or hurting people, or biting people, or doing inappropriate sexual things with other people, or doing inappropriate sexual things with dolls, then I had a counselor friend of mine talking about, this kid is like has these two dolls in this weird sexual position, going at each other, and it's like, whoa, he's like going, whoa, 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 what's up with that? Why does this kid even know about that? Which would be a huge, huge, huge red flag, obviously. So internal is what's going on inside of the kid, a little bit harder to observe, but you're going to see some signs of withdrawnness, quietness, sullenness, potentially, which again, that's a fine line between internal and external, but you're wanting to know what's going on inside of this kid, especially if you see a hint of something externally. Now, kids who have been sexually abused will oftentimes have physical pain. So it may be difficult for them to walk or sit. They may walk funny, or be, like, what's the deal? Because they're in pain. One of the good ways to deal with that is to get a doctor involved and get a medical evaluation. I wish I could show you my dogs. I've got I have two Doberman Pinschers, and they're puppies. They're 11 months old, and they're just gorgeous. I know now y'all are going to be like, oh. They just walked by us while they're standing there looking at me through the door, and I'm like, yeah, no, go away right now. Okay, sorry. Upset stomach, vomiting. This is usually due to anxiety. Possibility that the child has been being drugged, which also may cause some symptoms. Drawings, strange interactions with others, sexual interactions. sex play with peers. And again, we say deep sex play here because the children will do the whole little discover each other and look, you show me yours and I'll show you mine kind of stuff. And some of that's relatively normal, although concerning, I know, for a parent when it's like, oh. Um, so when it goes a little further and a little deeper than that, then that becomes a problem when they're beginning to penetrate one another, either with body parts, fingers, or objects. Um, that gets into deep sexual play, just to define that. Sorry, I know that's kind of for some of you maybe. Um, Toys and animals, I've really said probably most of this. A secretive behavior, particularly secretive. Kids need a little personal space, and there's going to be some level of that that's normal. So again, you've got to have discernment. Um, extreme compliance or withdrawal, and that would be if you observed with a particular person and that person like, hey, come here, and it's like, like, what was that about? It seemed uncharacteristic for that particular child. Regression, they maybe they were potty trained and now they're acting as though they're not potty trained. They were not clingy, and now they're clingy to mom or dad. Those kinds of things. They've started wetting the bed, soiling the bed. And so those are just some of the signs that one would look for. And I tell people all the time, it's like, look, largely I'll have people come to me and say, oh, I think something's going on with my kid. Okay, well, let's go through some of this. Let's look at it. Let's talk about it. But usually, I mean, hopefully the parents know their kid, right? So my child is acting differently. All right, well, let's try to nail that down as to specifically how is your child acting differently. And then let's talk about what might be going on. And it could just be problems at school. They may be being bullied. They may have a problem with a teacher. There's all kinds of things that can cause a child to act differently. So we don't want to jump to conclusions and that are unwarranted and too quickly, because that can be pretty damaging as well. So yes, so children do attempt suicide. Small children. I've trying to think. I used to work in a psychiatric hospital at a children's unit. I've seen 5-year-olds talking about killing themselves. So I mean, it definitely happens at a very early age in a few. And some of you are probably going, "Oh, that's demonic." Well, it is not good. Let me just tell you that it's ugly. Major changes in school performance, drops in school performance. Fear of either males or females, suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempt, ideation of suicidal thoughts. Sorry, I probably should put those right next to each other, but anyway, sorry, there you go. Anytime that there's a particular itching or pain or bleeding in the genitalia of a male or a female, anally or genitalially, you want to get doctors to look at that. You want to take that seriously. Obviously, kids itch, kids go, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, problems and kind of ongoing, and you want to be observant and aware of those kinds of things. Any kind of blood or discharge on their undergarments or in the toilet when they go to the bathroom. Psychosomatic, soma, this word here, soma, of the body, it's Greek. Psycho of the mind. So this is talking about illnesses that don't particularly have any founding, soreness or pain, or that doesn't have any illness diagnosis, right? So, and then sometimes that's hard to ferret out for sure. Pregnancy at early age, STDs, of course. Sometimes children will act and begin to appear overly sexual. So you're kind of like, okay, why is this kid looking really sexual all of a sudden? That can be a problem. Sleep disturbances, nightmares, and night terrors, which, sometimes those things just happen with kids too. Let's see, self-esteem, self-worth issues, depression, anxiety, guilt, shame. These are all the kinds of things that you're looking for. Hostility, of course, kids can blow up, but we're talking about uncharacteristic for the child or at a level of severity that we don't usually have flashbacks and nightmares. So these are signs and symptoms. Again, not necessarily a complete list, but a pretty good size list. You're going to see some of those things in a kid that is being sexually abused. So how do we intervene? there is a legal process in every area. Understand and know what the rules and the laws are. For example, is for me as a counselor, if I hear about a child being sexually abused, I have 24 hours to report it. Literally, need to call Child Protective Services and report it, and they will investigate. Now, some of you may struggle with Child Protective Services. Maybe you've had a bad experience with Child Protective Services. If this child is being sexually abused and you do not call Child Protective Services, then you are an accessory to the crime, and you may be fined or lose your license or imprisoned or all three. So if that makes you feel a little bit better about calling CPS, then there you go. But it is the law, and we are to abide by the law. So yeah, that I don't really have a lot of patience for counselors that are like, oh, but I heard this story of this person that got ripped away from the family by Child Protective Services and it was unwarranted. So first of all, you don't know all the details, and second of all, sure, that happens. You have bad apples in every basket of apples. There's no question about that. But your heart and your goal is to be law-abiding citizen and to protect this child. So you have to report it. There's also the when do we call the police versus when do we call Child Protective Services, and sometimes you can call both. And usually when you call the police, it's in the intensity of a crisis in the home. Okay. What are the facilities that can be helpful in your area? Know that the kid needs to go to the doctor, the kid needs to go to the hospital, emergency room. What are some of the professionals in your area that specialize in dealing with people who have been children who have been sexually abused? Obviously know the laws for your area. Always cooperate with law enforcement and yield to them and be respectful of them. As Christians and as counselors, you need to do that in a very big way. And I can't stress that enough. Boy, I tell you what, a counselor that rises up against a cop and says, "Oh, but we need to do this and this and yeah, no, not going to make our field look good, not going to make you look good, not going to represent Christ well at all." It is yes, sir, yes, ma'am, we're on it. Exactly what you need to do. I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you. Whatever you want me to do. You want me to go stand over there? Yes, sir, I will go stand over there. None of this, oh, but I need to be here and listen to this too. If they want you to step aside, you need to step aside. So be very respectful of law enforcement, please, in a situation where you're there on scene. Understand the possible a kid who has been sexually abused is going to may expect to be blamed. So your nonverbal communication is very important. The tone of your voice is very important. You don't want to do or say anything that's going to give the kid any room to feel like you are blaming them. Well, if you wouldn't have been running around at 10 o'clock at night, this wouldn't happen to you. That's a blame statement. That may be a fact. It may be true. But nonetheless, right now, in the midst of trying to discover and uncover and begin to deal with and intervene in a child sexual abuse case, you don't want to go there with them. If you are not supportive, if the family, always we're teaching the family to be supportive as well. I can't tell you how many people have told me, yeah, I told my mom and she didn't believe me. And oh my goodness, this is maybe 30 years later and they're still wounded by that. You want to not use leading questions. Oh, so he touched you this way, didn't he? That's a leading question. So how did he touch you? Where did he touch you? What did he do? If we're going to take this kid to the hospital, we need to let them know what to expect. We need to tell them, you're going to have a physical examination. The doctor's going to look at you. It is going to be intrusive. You're going to figure out another word, intrusive, for a 7-year-old, but you understand what I'm saying. Be honest with them. I mean, they need to know that ahead of time. You don't want to tell them, oh, it's fine, it's no big deal, it's painless completely, and they go in there and here they are sticking something up in me to try to get out blood samples or semen or whatever, and it's like, whoa, nobody told me this was going to happen. That's not good, and that's on you. and that's going to help cause the child to not trust you. And if you're the one going to be working with them, they need to trust you. So yes, you need to tell them this is going to be rough. I'm telling you, it's going to be rough. You are not going to enjoy it. You're not going to like it. It's important. You'll be okay. I'm going to support you through it. Your mom and dad are here and love you and are going to support you through it. But this is going to be rough. I'm just telling you that straight up. And some of you may disagree with that. And you wouldn't tell a 7-year-old that. Oh, yes, I would. When my kids come to me with a cut on their hand and I've got to work on that cut, they say, "Daddy, does it hurt?" And I say, "Yes, it's going to hurt." Or, "Daddy, is it going to hurt?" I say, "Yes, it's going to hurt. Promise, guarantee it's going to hurt." I hate it when a doctor says, "Oh, this won't hurt a bit." And it's like, you're killing me. I would much rather you say, "Yes, it's going to hurt, but it'll be all right." And I'll say, "I'm going to hold your hand. You can squeeze my hand as hard as you need to. Daddy's right here. You're going to be okay. But yes, this is going to hurt." I'm always honest, brutally honest with my children. Um, and that builds trust, and they appreciate that. Um, Again, here at the bottom, I'm just reemphasizing that you do have a legal and moral and ethical responsibility to report child sexual abuse. I'll even hear people say, "Well, if we report this, then the abuse will get worse." Well, if you don't report it, it's going to continue, and as it continues, it will get worse. I can't go that logic with you. No, if they report it and they're investigated, and the Child Protective Services does not set up protective measures or remove the child from the home, yes, it will probably get worse. But that is not your call and not your decision, and that's way down the road in the process of an investigation, not something for you to speculate. You can't make a decision not to report just because you speculate that it might end up worse for this kid in the future. You cannot do that. So what types of treatment do we use? Cognitive behavioral therapy is probably the most widely used and widely proven therapy for almost everything out there. It's been studied probably the most. Systems theory talks about bringing in the family and dealing with family issues and communication, and the concept is a family is a system, and there are many systems in our world, and everything that happens within the system affects everybody else in the system. So you really want to this incident affected mom and dad and siblings as well, so you want to get them in and talk it through with them as well. The assessment process needs to be very thorough, obviously. Highly recommend play therapy. Play therapy can be very powerful for younger children, age appropriate, of course. You can get a 15-year-old in there. Some 15-year-olds will love play therapy, by the way. That's, you can do some play therapy stuff. It's going to look a little different with a 15-year-old than it is with a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old, but play therapy is very, very, very powerful. And if you don't specialize in it and you feel like this kid needs it, then find someone who does. Denial is something that you're going to have to deal with everybody involved, the family and the victim. Deal with it gently and honestly, but definitely deal with it. There is, when it comes to perpetrators receiving treatment, females get much less treatment than males do, which it's one of those things you look at and scratch your head and go, "Well, why aren't they in treatment just like the male sex offenders are in treatment?" And I don't know that I have the answer for you. There are many programs in especially larger communities, sex offender treatment programs. They are oftentimes court appointed. Many times they are, if they're not in prison, they're required to go through sex offender treatment. The victim empathy, working through denial, acknowledgement of fault, acknowledgement of harm to the victim. Those kinds of things are some of the beginning stages, and then beginning to figure out what's going on with this person and how they got to where they are and why they did what they did, helping them understand that. It can be powerful, it can be effective. I actually did sex offender treatment for about 2 years in Lew Sterrett Jail in downtown Dallas with inmates that were from Massachusetts. And that was a very interesting time, but it can be a very, very, very neat and very powerful deal. All right, so that is the end of that section. And we're going to move on to emergency preparedness. Now, if you can see here, I have two emergency preparedness. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to post both of them in Blackboard for you guys, but I'm going to just teach from one of them so that I'm not teaching the same thing twice, if you will. Okay, so there is more and more we are beginning to look at how much more in much more sophisticated ways. How do we deal with a crisis? Well, what happens when there's a disaster, when there's an emergency? What do we do? And some of this is very scientific and technical and complicated, and some of it is very commonsensical, right? Move out of the way of the fire, run away from the fire. So there's some stuff that's really what gets technical and what gets complicated is depending on what type of crisis you're dealing with, who does what, right? So in a school, everybody has a job. If you hear gunshots, you need to start doing this. Boom, go, right? And hopefully they practice it and they know it. I mean, everybody has their role. Everybody has something that they are supposed to do. Just simply awareness that, hey, we might have a problem, and if there's a problem, move away from the danger. It's got to be a little more complex than that. Obviously, we have massive increases in workplace violence over the past, oh my goodness, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It just does not ever cease to blow my mind how often I hear of a workplace or a school shooting violence. It happens all the time. And there's all kinds of other emergencies as well. Crisis counselors are needed and they are in demand. There's training, and I have a friend who does this, who goes in and does crisis counseling. CACREP is an accreditation for counseling programs, and they have requirements for emergency preparedness. They have details on what needs to be taught when it comes to crisis counseling. There are many disciplines that are going to work together in any kind of a crisis. So you may be on scene, and there's police, there's fire, there's SWAT, there's maybe military people there, depending on where you are in the world or where you happen to be. Counselors, medical personnel. There's going to be all kinds of people involved. And then once the crisis is over and people are triaged into the treatment that they need, there's still multiple people involved in providing mental and physical and emotional and spiritual support. You may have a chaplain and a counselor work together to work with people. Part of what I want us to be able to do is you need to represent your Lord well, and you need to represent your field well. So that means you need to be friendly and warm and very much a team player. And if anything, you're the one bringing the multiple disciplines together all the more. You may not like it. You may think this is too much or it's chaotic, whatever. Everybody has their role. Everybody has their place. You want to make sure that you are helpful in that process. Now, counselors sometimes are the media liaison. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to talk to the media. And some of you are like, oh man, that would be great. This is something that takes a fair amount of skill. What you say can cause an institution problems legally, may cause you problems. So it's a sticky wicket. I don't know where that saying comes from, but it can be a bit challenging. And it's going to be, obviously, you're going to be commissioned by the leadership of an organization. You don't just rise up and go, oh, I'll talk to the media. Yeah, no, I don't talk to the media. So you're out there on site, and you're representing ABC school of whatever, and you're a counselor, and Channel 11 comes up and sticks a microphone in your face. You say, I'm not your media person. I'm not the media liaison you need to talk to. My boss, who is so and so, I don't talk to the media. Literally, you just we're not going there, because it can be really bad for everybody if you say the wrong kinds of things. There's what's called a mortality liaison, dealing with the number count and the coroner's office and cause of death, and can you release the names of the, all those kinds of things, right? So we're talking about explosion, fire, whatever, right? It's always interesting to me. They'll say, they think that there's 3 deaths and the names of the victims have not yet been released, right? So that's a process that's beyond me, but that's a process, right? And then there's going to be a leader, multidisciplinary crisis response team leader, MCRT. But refer back to the top. If you look at MCRT here and go, what's that? It's this right here. For those of you that, yeah, I know, sorry. Okay, so there's going to be a leader, and that's going to be a leader in the organization, in your organization, whatever that is. Your organization probably has an MCRT. You may not even know it. Whatever company you work for, whether it be medical field or counseling field or financial field or whatever it is, there probably is an MCRT leader at your office. Human Resources will know who that is if you're curious. Terrorism and hostage situations obviously create an incredible amount of stress for anybody and everybody involved. And your job is to be you're to be a calming factor. You're to be a help in those kinds of situations. So generally speaking, it is broken down and studied and looked at in terms of broadly speaking, 2 different types of trauma. You have individual trauma, where a person, the stress and trauma that an individual has experienced, and then you have collective trauma, where entire communities are affected, and those things are handled obviously differently. You want to, you can look up at more detail in the textbook about timelines for intervening in a disaster. The very first things that happen in intervention are crucial. And one of the things that we know is the sooner we intervene, the more likely we are to have a good outcome in terms of people's emotional recovery. So that's just an important concept to keep in mind. Okay, so I want you to keep in mind, kind of keep in the background of your thoughts, that we are not trying to put anybody in a box. When we talk about what are going to be the reactions of people when they run into a crisis, right? Because based on our gender, based on our individual personalities, based on how we feel at the moment, based on maybe thousands of factors that would play into it, if a crisis happened today at noon and a crisis happened tonight at 8 o'clock, and it was the same exact circumstance in the same exact place, and it was me, if we could somehow create that kind of a scenario, I may react very differently at noon than I do at 8, or vice versa, and the long-term effects may even be different. So the complexity of us as humans cannot be stressed enough, obviously. However, we do see quite a few common themes when it comes to how people react and how people feel. So in terms of thought processes, cognitively, there are all kinds of things that go on in people's minds. Blaming is really big. Inability to concentrate for quite a while, sometimes for months. And obviously, if that goes on, it's time for counseling, right? It's somewhere down that road. Disorientation, lowered self-esteem, intrusive thoughts of the crisis, thoughts of other crisis, fear of future other crisis, ruminating about really anything, but certainly about the incident, hypersensitivity, confusion, nightmares, memory problems. There's all kinds of stuff, right, that goes on. And thought-wise, just in a person's mind. At some level, it's like overloading the circuits, putting too much electricity in there. It's really hard for the brain to kind of keep up with a severe crisis. If you are a witness of or a victim of or in the midst of a severe crisis. It can really change the way your brain functions for quite a while, actually. So physical reactions, we talk about fight or flight. We talk about increased heart rate, shakiness, dizziness, increased uh, blood pressure, galvanic skin response, which is the moisture that can't be measured by touch or eyesight. It's a machine that measures your moisture on the skin. That's going to increase. You may get weakness, chills, dizziness, faint. Some people faint. Some people freeze. Uh, Even after, for quite a while after an incident, the libido is increased, no interest in sexual activity, or low, very much lowered interest in headaches, vomiting, shock, fatigue, sweating, rapid breathing. Um, so physical reactions, emotional reactions can be everything from apathy to uh, rage and anxiety, agitation, panic, feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, anger, grief, loss, all kinds of things. There's a pretty good list there, and that's really not an all inclusive list. And then behaviorally, people struggle with eating sometimes. Maybe they eat too much, maybe they don't eat enough, maybe they sleep too much, don't sleep enough. They feel restless a lot. They become more aggressive with other people. They're not interested in social activities. They may fall into some kind of addiction. Not everybody does, but it's relatively common. PFA, psychological first aid. So this would be, again, you called in as a counselor uh, shortly after a crisis. So I have a friend who does this. He told me about a story of a guy that worked as an 18-wheeler mechanic, diesel mechanic for 18-wheelers. And he was, in his 50s. He had worked for this company for like 30 years, and almost everybody there had worked 20 plus years. So pretty close-knit group of guys. And they were all men that worked as diesel mechanics at this one company. And he was out unhooking a rig from the tractor from the trailer, and he hopped out and walked back, and the trailer he didn't get it in the brake failed, or he didn't put the brake on or something, and the trailer rolled and caught him and put him under one of the wheels and just crushed him, killed him right then and there. I mean, just wow. So the uh, most companies are required. Uh, it's really viewed as morally and ethically expected. It can have legal ramifications too, obviously, to provide a counselor. So a counselor shows up and says, "Okay, guys, let's talk about this." Well, it depends on the setting, it depends on the culture. Sometimes people don't want to talk about this, so it can be tough initially. And he sometimes he'll be sent to a situation. He said, "I will." They'll. He said, "I can tell the management's not happy about me being there, not happy that this is happening, that we have to do this. They will set me up in a room somewhere, send out an email to everybody and say, hey, there's a counselor in such and such room. If anybody wants to talk to him, he'll be there from noon to 3. And he has literally sat in the room alone for 3 hours and talked to no one. The company is then at that moment, the company, it's like, well, we have satisfied our legal obligation and we move on. Let's produce our product or our service and move on. Sad, 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 but that is just a reality out there that's actually very common still. There's still enough stigma about counseling in the world that that kind of stuff happens. So, all right. So, what's the goal? We want to reduce stress right at the beginning, as early as possible. As the earlier we can intervene, the better. Obviously, we don't have a lot of control over that a lot of times. We want people are resilient, generally speaking, and it just because it's a severe situation doesn't mean that it's going to be long-term problems. So we want to help people tap into their resilience. We want to teach them this concept and help them understand, hey, this is not the end of the world, and it's not going to mess you up forever. It may for a few days, and that's okay. It may a little longer than that, and if we need to work through some things, we can. Um, Psychological first aid works really well with almost any age. It can be done on an individual basis or in groups, and it works well both in individual and in groups. My friend who does this will oftentimes have a group that he'll sit down and talk with as well. Some of the basics are you want to be extremely compassionate. You're creating, you are a safe person, and you're communicating to them that you're a safe person. You're providing comfort. You're connecting with them. You're non-intrusive. You're non-threatening. You are a good listener. You recognize and value their relationship with the victim. Sometimes people will, oh, it was my best friend, and somebody else may be looking at you like, yeah, not really. Well, okay, well, that's fine. That's not for you to judge. You are just there to validate them and what they're feeling. You want to say and do things that will help empower them. In other words, they need to make decisions, and sometimes it's like, do you want to sit over there or over there to get out of the way of all of this, right? So that may sound stupid, but that gives them, if someone, I'm talking about to someone who's just in utter shock. Now, if they can't make that decision, I'm just going to lead them to where, where I think is the safest place to be. But you want to give them as much power over their situation and over their circumstances. It helps people have more of a vested sense of I am safe, and I made decisions to help get me safe. And again, that's in a situation where there's potentially ongoing danger, so it's move away from the fire, kind of a thing again. You excuse me. What are their immediate needs? You want to help them concretely figure that. Sometimes they need a bottle of water, they need a blanket, they need to be able to call. I just want to call my mom. Okay, let's call your mom. Do you have a cell phone? No, I lost it in the chaos. Okay, well, do you remember her number? No. All right, I'm gonna get on my phone. We're gonna look her up and find her best we can. Do you know anybody's phone number that you might be able to know your mom's phone? Whatever. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, you don't know your mom's cell phone number. Well, in today's age where you just hit the name, right, or it's just a voice, call mom. Like, yeah, no, I don't know mom's number. It's actually fairly common for people as opposed to back when we used to have to dial that all the time. We got used to memorizing numbers. Um, so you want to help them get their needs met, very specific and very concrete. Sometimes it's a matter of I need a place to stay tonight. My house just burnt down. Okay, well we can work on that. We want to. People are oftentimes feel very overwhelmed. They are in a heightened emotional state of maybe panic, and so with our voice and possibly with touch, but we've got to be careful with touch. We want to help them stabilize and get grounded, and may encourage them to do some breathing. So look at me. I need you to breathe. I need you to look at my eyes. I need you to breathe exactly like I breathe. All right, here we go. I mean, literally, and that may just sound crazy to some of you, but you really got to get people. Sometimes you got to get people back. Sometimes you've got to, if someone's in the heat of something, you may have to yell at them. I would not recommend slapping somebody. You may have seen on a movie or something where someone goes out to rescue somebody and the person being rescued is about to drown the person that's rescuing him. And what do? They ball up their fist and punch him in the face as hard as they can. It's like, whoa, okay, yeah, that kind of snapped them out of that one. Yeah, well, I'm good with that in that situation. Certainly don't recommend that. But you may have to break through to get to them, so to speak. They may be so engulfed in some kind of intensity that it's like, they need some sort of a jolt to get out of it. And that's usually not the case, but I'm just throwing out there as many odd scenarios as I can think of. So they may feel very isolated. You want to try to get them connected with other people, family, friends, as soon as possible. connection with you is a teeny bit of help, but not much, probably, ultimately. For the moment, yeah. I mean, they may say later, "Wow, you were just like a face of hope for me, and thank you, and it was amazing." Yeah, but ultimately, we need to get you connected with your close friends and family, spouse, children, whatever it may be. Think about what's going on with people culturally, spiritually. Be sensitive to that. And if I ask somebody, "Can I pray for you?" and they say no, I'm gonna go, "All right, cool, no problem. I'm gonna pray for them silently anyway." Um, help them tap into their coping skills as far as talking or whatever, connecting with people, relationship skills. Maybe they need to write about it. This would be a little beyond the intensity of the moment, usually. But get them thinking in terms of how they're going to cope without just going and getting drunk, in other words, which is a coping skill, an unhealthy coping skill, but it is one. Give them resources and references that are phone numbers and be very specific and very concrete to help them access the resources that they need. You may be in a large situation and you know where the FEMA tent is and they don't know where the FEMA tent is. Walk them to the FEMA tent if that's part of what they need, right? So, oh yeah, it's down the street a few blocks and turn right and you can't miss it. It's right. Don't do that to somebody because they're not thinking right. They're not thinking straight. They're not clear. You want to physically take them there. Okay. Critical incident stress management, CISMs, is just kind of a different model of sort of the same thing that we just finished talking about. So you want to look at individual needs, take all of the uniqueness of their individual situation into consideration. You want to be able to assess as quickly as possible or gain access to what types of resources and interventions are available and needed based on the situation. And again, that might be blankets and bottles of water, right? I mean, it could be more complicated than that. But oftentimes, when we're talking about dealing with some kind of an emergency or crisis, then a lot of the first things that happen with people is their immediate, just absolute safety. Right? Let's just get you out of the uh, danger zone, so to speak, as quickly as possible. Okay, so for the first component of this is they're gonna be offered some crisis counseling. This is for a month or so, maybe as long as 3 months. You're gonna work with remember these are plans and organizations, right? So what about a leadership team that has lost their most of or some of or a lot of their staff? I mean, you think about 9/11, it's like, whew. Then you've got the multidisciplinary aspect of it. You've got um, counselors. One of the things that they did after the 9/11 was people that were affected in the companies near where the bomb went off, where the airplanes hit the towers, would instead of calling it counseling, they would say trainings. We have these required trainings post 9/11 trainings that you've got to go to. People are like, okay, they get in there, and and the counselor would do some kind of psychoeducational training stuff, but certainly begin to work with them as a counselor as well. And that actually worked out well for the most part, and was good and was helpful. And so some of that has to do when you think about stuff like this, and it's like, let's be let's be creative. Sometimes we have to be creative. Um, so you can also do acute traumatic stress group training sessions. So we do this in groups as well as individually, and when it's done in groups, it helps decrease their sense of isolation. They can, if you can get them to sharing and get them to talking, like, oh yeah, I feel that too. So it normalizes emotions. You can actually normalize emotions just by saying, hey, if you're feeling anxious, that's normal, right? Oh, really? Yeah, that's very normal. If you feel guilt, your buddy died and you didn't, and you feel guilty for that. That's very normal. And some people don't know that. They're like, really? That's normal? Yeah, it's very normal, and it will subside. It may be strong for quite a while, but it will eventually subside. Um, and then another part of these trainings are helping people tap into and increase and teach healthy coping skills. You always want to have a hotline for people to call if they have problems, suicidal thoughts later, for example, or just need to talk. Can be helpful. And then some kind of a reentry program that where people that were truly exposed to the most, obviously the more severe, the more trauma people were exposed to, the more time it's going to take to walk them through these 6 components. So you want to get them back to their jobs, but you really want it to be gradual, slow, easy. The pressure and stress of a high pressure job shortly after a severe crisis, especially if you're exposed to a lot of carnage and destruction, you just can't do it. I mean, it's just you find people sitting at their desk just staring. Like, what are you doing? I don't know. I'm not here. It's just like, and they'll like, I just can't, I can't, I just can't do it. It's just too much. So companies have learned you really got to work with people, gradually introduce them to more and more so that they can get back to, quote, normal, whatever normal means, right? When y'all figure out what normal is, let me know because I have no idea. um, okay, crisis counseling model, program model. You want to assess strengths. I feel like, and some models focus more on strengths than others, and you really want to uh, I like the concept of focusing on strengths, and that may be, well, their relationship with the Lord. Okay, good, that's a strength, right? That's one of their strengths. It may not be. Um, what are their resources? Sometimes people don't. They have resources that they don't realize are resources. Well, have you talked to your human resources department and told them you're struggling yet? No, that's a resource. Let's go. I'll walk down there with you and we can talk to them. Really? Yeah, I'll sit there with you. Okay, thanks. It doesn't always go that smoothly. Sometimes they're resistant, but you're helping them connect with actual resources, whether it be physical resources, a bottle of water and a blanket, or whether it be getting them connected with people, the right people that can help them. So we want to reduce chaos, obviously, and that can be the immediate chaos of the moment, but even the chaos in their mind over time, and get them back to a sense of being a little more calm and being able to function. Um, People need to, you have to help them gradually and slowly uh, accept things at face value. So there may be some loss. They may have lost their best friend. They may have lost a limb. They may, their home is gone. Their community is gone. Their whole town is gone, right? I mean, what? So that this is a reality. This is where we're at. This is the impact. Um, we will rebuild. We will help you rebuild. You will get beyond this. Those kinds of things. So again, you're it's kind of a stating the obvious, but you're helping people accept the reality of this is where we're at, moving them towards where they can be back to some sense of functioning and normalcy again. um, Validate them. You may not agree with them spiritually. You may not like what they're saying, but validate their pain. Validate their feelings. In the Carl Rogers uh, person-centered therapy, he would say, as far as the counseling theorist, he would talk about unconditional positive regard, acceptance. So you want to accept them as a person. You may not like them, you may not agree with them, but you accept them, and you help them understand that the pain and the struggle that you feel is valid and real, and I validate you. You want to educate them as much as possible. You can do this groups and individually, and oftentimes it's done both. Help them understand what's okay and what's not okay, and anything's okay, right? We just validated you, so it's okay. But this is normal. Now, if this goes on for 6 months from now, and it is as intense as it is now, whew, then That's not normal, right? So you gotta be careful with saying you're abnormal. That's not what I'm talking about, but helping them understand, okay, this probably needs tweaking. This probably needs work. Um, might need a counselor to help you with that. In natural disasters, and again, this is one of those situations where um, your what you do and what you expect from your people that you're working with, and what is expected of